We're here to mark the 20th anniversary of the U.S. attack and invasion of Iraq in 2003. And many of us are thinking about that here in the United States. But today, we're very privileged to have the perspective of an Iraqi, my good friend and comrade Jamal Al-Tahir, who is living in Moscow right now with his Russian wife. And I think, in all the discussions about the U.S. war, we often fail to have access to or listen to the voices of actual Iraqis. And I think today is a unique opportunity that I hope will be rewarding to all of us. Let me say briefly that I've never met Jamal in person, but we've gotten to know each other through correspondence. After a few years ago, he responded to an article I wrote actually about the U.S. working class, not about the Middle East. And we've been corresponding and emailing ever since. And I take great pride in the fact that he refers to me as his comrade, and I reciprocate the same. So although we haven't met in person, I feel that we have a very comradely relationship. And I'll leave it to Jamal to introduce himself, better than I will. But so Jamal, I'll pass it on to you. If you could explain a little bit about who you are and your background, and then we'll talk about an Iraqi view of what happened in 2003, 20 years ago. And then I hope you'll be able to go back in time and sort of explain the longer history of the U.S. relations with Iraq and the political scene in Iraq, and a lot of which will be very little known to most of your American listeners. So, Jamal, Comrade Jamal, if you would take it away and talk about yourself a bit.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for your kind introduction. Hello there, everybody. My name is Jamal Al-Tahir. I was born in Basra, 1941. I had a very interesting life, and especially my childhood. My parents were good students, hardworking people. They traveled, they were sent to study, first of all in France, and then to the USA. And they took me with them. So I was so lucky that I spent a big part of my childhood in the USA, in the windy city of Chicago. And I went there to Kosminski School, and I picked up my English there. And since then, I have tried not to lose it. Returning to Iraq afterwards, I had to learn Arabic again because I completely lost it. I knew only English. It took me a couple of years. And then after finishing school in Iraq, being not a bad student, I was sent to study in the USSR. I studied there. I graduated in 1968. I came back to Iraq and worked there for 28 years. And after that, I just went, I retired. And after so many years in Iraq, I decided that I would go back to Russia. My wife just couldn't take it anymore. She had had enough of Iraq. So we went back to, we now reside in Moscow, Russia. And, both of us are retired. That's briefly how, just what I am.
Explain a little bit about your career, what your work.
I worked as a geophysicist. I was a party chief of a seismic crew for a long time, and then I was a representative of our company with various foreign crews that worked in Iraq, and then I was responsible for quality control of seismic data. Mainly about my main trend was working in the field and controlling data coming from the field. That's it. That's how I put it.
In the petroleum industry, right?
Yes, in the petroleum industry, yes. Seismic exploration in the petroleum industry.
Well, if I may, you are looking up and it looks kind of unnatural. Is it possible for you to look at the camera? Yeah,
Yes,
like that. That's
yeah, yeah.
better. If you can,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes,
Right,
and
you still visited the U.S. as during your professional career. Is that right?
yes, I was sent 2 or 3 times to the US we were buying some equipment, and we were also upgrading our knowledge, both together. Mostly we travel, my destination was Texas, USA. Texas, yes. It was Houston and Dallas. Yeah.
You didn't run into the bushes by any chance while you
No, no. In those days, you remember, I think there was a cereal very popular. I forgot its name. Oh yes, Dallas. Yes. What surprised me most of all when I came to, I forgot what the U.S. was. When I came there, was that nobody walked in the street. It was. I remember that it was a wonderful Sunday. I looked out. I expected people to take their kids and moms and grandmas with their proms to go and walk in the street just like they do in Russia or in Europe. But nobody was on the street on a sunny, bright day. I was so surprised. I just couldn't understand. And then it came back to me that in the States, everybody sits in their car and goes someplace to do a thing, but he doesn't walk there. So it took me some time to understand that.
Just for our audience, so Jamal is very steeped from his childhood and later on in American culture, and part of what we exchange about is our common experiences growing up in the United States. So maybe that'll come up later, but people will be surprised at your knowledge of.
I'll end the introductory part with a small remark. You guys caught me a bit early. I wasn't expecting you. I was expecting you an hour later. So I wanted to put on my hoodie, my Seahawks hoodie. If there is any football fan over there, he would understand what I'm talking about. I thought I would, just to make people understand that this is a small world. We all should be friends. We should understand each other. You see somebody living in Iraq and now residing in Russia, but I like American football. I don't deny it. I am not a snob. I like American football, and I'm a fan of the Seahawks because they make mistakes and they always end up in a sad situation, just like Iraq.
Thank you. Well, we could go on.
Yes, I understand.
Personal and family experience, but let's return now to the anniversary that we're marking, and I'd like to start with hearing from you about what your impressions were of the U.S. invasion and what you understood from your friends and family and so on.
Actually, Jeff, the U.S. invasion is a product of a long thing that goes back to 1991. And it is the child of several fathers. It's the child of neoconservatism. It is the child of the Rand Corporation. It is the child of the so-called clash of civilizations. It's all this that created an atmosphere that there were persons who came up with the Project for New American Century, an organization which had people in it. These people were part of the Bush Senior and the Bush Junior administration, and so this is what I wanted to point out at the beginning when talking about 2003. Also, that from 2001 till 2003, there was a continuous bombing of Iraq all the time. Around 250,000 sorties were made from 1992 till 2003. 250 sorties, about 34,000 sorties per year. Can you imagine? So it wasn't just, as if though there was nothing happening. And especially, I would point out that in 1998, just at the time when Bill Clinton was due to be impeached, there was a huge attack on Iraq. I think about 30 or 40 rockets and bombs, and really it was a huge thing. So in 1993, there was also a big attack besides the sorties. This is beside the sorties. So as I told you, it is one continuous thing. But the climax come when Bush Jr. Became president and the neocons came to power. There was, Paul Wolfowitz, Douglas Faith, Richard Pearl, and Zalmay Khalilzad. They were all in power. They had an access to the dollar. I think that Truman said, follow the dollar or something like that. Yeah. Anyway, so this is what I'm trying to say before we start going into the details of the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Okay, so I hope I have made my point of view clear. This is what I think is essential. Besides the ideological stuff, which was by Bernard Lewis. If anybody is interested in in Muslim civilization, he is a big authority on Muslim civilization. Although Muslims do not agree with him, but he is still considered in the West a big authority. Bernard Lewis. And on the other side, we have an American senator. His name is Henry Scoop Jackson. He is also one of the who created this environment, which came up with the project for New American Century. That's it. This is all I want to say about 2003, and then I will go back to 1990. This, just if you ask me what happened to me on the 2nd of August, where was I on the 2nd of August? Before I start on talking about serious stuff, me and my wife were taking my son to go to Kuwait. Can you imagine? The swimming team, he was a member of the swimming team of Iraq. He was supposed to go to Kuwait on the 2nd of August. And we took him to the bus and they told him, the driver, he said sardonically, other guys have gone there. So this as a personally, what happened to me. I would like to, to put you in some perspective of what Iraq is before I start with the serious stuff. Iraq is not only a place of oil resources, it is also geopolitically a very important locality, a very important place. So if we go back to a bit in history tonight, to the 1950s, you will see that Iraq was the center of the Baghdad Pact. The Baghdad Pact, which included Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, the UK. And it should ring a bell to us nowadays, because you had a sequence of pacts or allies which begin with NATO and come to the Baghdad Pact, then go to Southeast Asia to the Seattle. So what you have is a chain that surrounds the then USSR. And Iraq was a very important place for the Baghdad Pact. I'm talking about 1955. This is just to give you an idea, how important Baghdad is from the geopolitical situation, and it is not only a matter of oil.
So maybe you should remind people that in the 50s, up until 1958, Iraq was ruled by a monarch that was installed by the British colonialists.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yes, that's true, Jeff. Yes. I took it for granted that people should not know this, you know. Yeah, I'm talking about 1955. This was before the revolution of 1958 in Iraq. Now, my next piece of information, which I would like to give to you, is who is Saddam Hussein? Who is Saddam Hussein besides what you have read, what you know? What is his background? What is his family? Where is this person from? How did he appear on the stage of Iraqi politics? Saddam Hussein was born on 28th of April, 1937, not in Tikrit. He was born in a small village south of Tikrit, which is called Al-Auja. Now, I must tell you, in Arabic, words mean a lot. Al-Auja means, in Arabic, it is a place where the Tigris makes a curve. But Auja in Arabic also means something which is dishonest, which doesn't have any principles, something like that. You see,
crooked in English, like crooked.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So he comes from a village called Crooked, and nobody actually knew who his father was, which is his mother worked with a certain big merchant. I think she got pregnant, but he wouldn't marry her. So they took her from this and married her to a somewhat retarded person. This retarded person started grumbling that the goods were not what he expected, etc. And her brother killed this guy. So Saddam grew up without a father. He didn't know really who his father was. Now, this is what I'm trying to convey to you. In a society where not knowing your father or not knowing your father's relatives, it's considered very shameful. You know, you have to know your relatives. It is very important in Arab culture to know who your uncles are from both sides, your mother's side and especially your father's side. Anyway, so this young guy, when he was 8 years old, and he found out that his uncle killed his supposed father, he killed his uncle. Afterwards, you know, his other uncle took him away from his village and took him to Baghdad to live in Baghdad. In Baghdad, he joined a bunch of thugs. And, you know, Iraq is a small country. Baghdad, it was then very provincial. Everybody knew everybody else. You could not become infamous or famous without everybody knowing who you were, what you were, and where you came from. And let me give you, again, I would like to add here a small thing that linguistic is important. In Arabic, if you say your name, there are certain names which only Shia call their children. And there are certain names which only Sunni call their children. And then if you give your family name and you say a locality, let's say you'll say Al-Ani, which means you are from Ana. This means you are from the Sunni triangle in Iraq, and you are Sunni, and you most of all either are an officer or work in the security services. So just from a name or from a family name, you can make a good guess who these people are. So this is so Saddam started in Baghdad with his thugs, with this and that, and he became one way or another involved with the nationalists, the Ba'athists. In 1957, he became a member of the Ba'athist Party, and he was part of an assassination attempt on Abdul Qasim. Abdul Qasim was the then president of Iraq, the most left president which Iraq has ever had, and he's still remembered today. The assassination failed, and he was wounded in the leg, and he went to Syria and then to Egypt. Then we found out that he received money from the Egypt security services, there was a big competition between Iraq and Egypt then, between Nasser and Abdul Karim Qasim. Okay, so this is from where Saddam came. He was a thug, he was a murderer, and he was from a very troubled childhood. And you can understand that this kind of a background creates a monster, one way or another. I thought that this is enough of talking a bit, of him about as a person. And now I would like to tell you something about, I don't know whether you will be able to see this or not. This is a map of Iraq.
Yeah,
This is, yes, can you see it?
yes.
Okay, I would like to bring your kind attention to the southern part of Iraq here. The southern part of Iraq over here. There's a cluster. You see the dark spots. This is a cluster of oil fields over here. And Iraq, as you can see, from northwest to south, from the north to the south, is cluster oil fields.
Yes.
Okay.
South, what you were pointing out, that's around Basra, right?
Yes, yes.
That's
The
where
cluster
you're
of
from.
oil fields, which is Rumaila and Zubair, are in the south of Basra. Okay.
Where you're from, right?
Yes. Original. Yeah. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is that the importance of this place, and when Saddam came after the Iranian war and started to talk about the pretensions he had that the Kuwaitis were using slanted drilling to these oil fields, slanted drilling from their country. This is what he was talking about. Okay, and the next thing which he tried to scout was to find out whether the United States would act if he tried to invade Kuwait. And he had this famous meeting with the American ambassador then, Mrs. April Glaspie, if any of you remember or recall that name. And she gave a very neutral answer, which he couldn't make heads or tails out of. And so he decided to invade Kuwait. From the military part, it was easy for him to do this. The commandos attacked from the sea, and the army attacked from just directly, and they quickly took over Kuwait. And I think one emir was shot dead, the younger brother of the emir of Kuwait. After this, I would like to stop on a point which I consider important. It is the buildup after the invasion, the buildup of Saddam as a monster, which is very easy to do because he definitely is a monster. But worse than that, they tried to build up that the Iraqis were monsters, not Saddam only, but the Iraqi people were monsters too. And of course, the Saddam regime committed a couple of grave errors which helped the West do this. The first one was the execution of a person called Farzad Bazoft. Farzad Bazoft, and they imprisoned a nurse who was with him, a young lady of European origin, whose name was Daphne Parish. Let me tell you, Farzad Bazoft was an Iranian living in Great Britain and working as a journalist. And he decided to he heard about there was a huge explosion outside Baghdad, and he wanted to investigate. And he and this nurse, this British nurse, went there. And of course, like I told you, Iraq is a small country, and Baghdad is a small city. As soon as they moved away, and he was with a blonde lady in a car going somewhere outside Baghdad, and he went to this district. And not only that, he made another stupid thing. He picked up some samples of the soil, you know, and of course he was caught. And he was they finally executed him after a certain period in prison. The lady stayed for a couple of months in prison, then they let her go free. This was the first thing in the build-up, in the psychological build-up to get. Of course, Margaret Thatcher was against, however, the Tories in the British Parliament said he still is not a Britisher. He is an Iranian, and he was sentenced previously in Britain for robbing. So there was not so much commotion. The next thing which helped them build up this reputation about Iraqis was the hostages. If you remember, Saddam decided to keep Europeans hostages in Iraq, or to put them into certain locations where he was afraid that they would bomb it. This was, I think, the absolutely stupid and horrible thing which he could do. And I was personally involved. I'll tell you how. In my crew, in my seismic crew, there were 20 British people, British and French, with me working. We all felt it is not as black as they sometimes the Western want to portray. So we felt very sorry for them. So they stopped working, and we tried to provide them with the best food. And I always gave them an ample supply of beer. And I took them to their embassies to have a swim in the pool and chase some girls and come back. See, it wasn't just things like black. It was sometimes black and white, sometimes gray. Anyway, I felt terrible, and I knew this was a hoax, and I knew that it would end not as he had planned. And finally, in December, of course, he let them all go free. They all went to, but the reputation of the people, of the Iraqi people, was totally ruined. Do you follow me? It was totally ruined after this hostage crisis. And my appeal to my American friends is, please take a good look at the racism, and I will try to explain. Because besides the Europeans and the Americans, there were people from India, from the Far East. Nobody ever mentioned them. Nobody ever mentioned them. I did not see a single newspaper or anybody say anything about them. And I felt terrible. I felt terrible about these people because they had a very hard time leaving Iraq. So, this is what I'm trying to say about the Western hostages and what happened to them.
Now, Jamal, before you get into detail about what we usually call the first Gulf War, maybe you could talk about the 1980s when Saddam Hussein had reason to believe that the Americans would favor his actions.
No, it is not they would favor or not. If you will allow me, if you are interested in this, if you will allow me just a minute, let me read to you what she said, what April said, because this is, if you think this is important, let me read to you what she said.
But I mean, just to remind our viewers that throughout
Yeah.
the 1980s, the U.S. was supporting Iraq militarily.
Okay. Yeah.
during the war with France.
You know, this is important because this is what she said. I think I understand this. I have lived here for years. I admire your extraordinary efforts to rebuild your country. I know you need funds. We understand that. And our opinion is that you should have the opportunity to rebuild your country. But we have, listen carefully, but we have no opinion on the Arab conflict. How about that? We have no opinion on the Arab conflict. This is from their minutes of meeting.
Meaning the conflict between Iraq and Kuwait.
Yeah. Yes. This is what I was trying to say. Yeah. So, you know, after all this, there is one more very, very important thing which also destroyed the reputation of the Iraqi people. It is the girl, the nurse, the Kuwaiti nurse, Nayara. If I will refresh the memory of my friends, my American friends. It is, you know, it is very difficult for any country to withstand the PR and the propaganda of the American system. Very difficult. So 2 months after the Kuwaiti marched into Kuwait, a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl came in Congress, the American Congress, and before the Congressional Human Rights Caucus on Capitol Hill, and she said the following, that the Iraqi soldiers entered a hospital and took out babies out of the incubators, about 302 or 320 babies, and threw them on the ground. Now, before this, the polls showed a certain level of support for the Iraqi, for war against Iraq, and after that, it changed from 17% till 40 or 40 something percent. And then it turned out that this girl was not a nurse. She was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador in the USA. And it was all a setup and by a certain company, PR company in the US called Hill and Knowlton. And you know, what surprises me is that nobody even checked, because any Iraqi or any Arab, when you tell him that a Kuwaiti girl is working as a nurse, he will start laughing. Because, you know, just a day ago, in order to check myself, I took Abu Dhabi as an example, and I checked the number of nurses, the local nurses and foreign nurses. The number of nurses from the local people are 0.7%, and the number of non-local nurses are 98%. So if you tell me that in Kuwait there are Kuwaiti girls working as nurses, I will start laughing, because I know very well that the nurses there are mainly from from India, from Thailand, just like Great Britain. In Great Britain, most of the nurses are also from India or from the Far East. Even Boris Johnson, I think, was treated by girls from India, although he is against immigration. So this is what I'm trying to tell you. All this created, and guess what? The Congress voted for war against Iraq by 52 to 47. So this is what I'm trying to say. You see, it all works. So now they had the Congress. and they went on to work with the United Nations. And of course, before I go that, if you look at the media coverage of Iraq at that time, it was, for instance, let me give you an example. How to choke Iraq, the New York Times. So it's all like that. It's whether it's the New York Times or the Washington Post, and these are the so-called liberals. I will not say anything about the rest of the newspapers which are to the right of all of them. So after this atmosphere, the events started unfolding. What do we have? There was a last-ditch negotiation. They tried the last time to negotiate. They brought in the Egyptian president brought the Iraqi side and the Kuwaiti side to meet in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. And the Iraqis asked for $10 billion. The Kuwaitis said, gave them only 500 million. 500 million. So of course the Iraqis refused, and there was also the something else which is purely psychological, but which was very means a lot in Arabic culture. It was said, there were rumors that there was a fight between the Iraqi side and the Kuwaiti side, when the Kuwaiti side will make your women give themselves up for $10. Now, you know, in Iraqi culture, you can do anything, you can say anything, but things like that are never forgiven. Jeff, you know what I'm talking about. Are never forgiven. They will remember 1,000 years that you said that. Anyway, so after that, it seems that there was some kind of a scuffle, and the Iraqi side left, and they went to, that's it, that was the end of it, the end of all negotiations.
So just to clarify, am I right in remembering that Iraq was charging that the Kuwaitis were stealing Iraqi oil?
Yes, yes.
At an angle across the border.
Yes, this is what I was trying to show on the map.
Yes. This is what I emphasize that so people understand what the dispute was about.
Yes.
The oil fields are close to the border. And
they are there.
Drill straight down, or you can drill at an angle. And the Iraqi Kuwait was drilling at an angle into Iraqi territory.
Yes, excuse me, Jeff. Just me put in a word here. It's about this. I was working there. I was working there. As my crew was working there on the in that place near the border. Our geologist had put on us a grid of where I was to work very near the border. They wanted to see where the structure would go. So when I was there, I did not let my surveyors go alone. I went with them because I was afraid that anything could happen. So when I went there with the surveyors, there was this car, this Kuwaiti car coming, armed car, and we were unarmed. And he was telling me, look, you are too near the border, etc. I took out the map. I said, take a good look. We are 4 kilometers away from the border. We are still inside Iraq. You are trespassing, and don't give me no, don't blah, blah, blah. This is Iraq, and please go away. That's it. And so it was finished like that. When I went to complain to the army officers, he just said, he smiled, and he said, Jamal, if it wasn't during the Persian War, the war with Iran, we would have stopped them with a single car. But now we can't do anything. Understand? Yeah, that's how it is. So anyway, like I said, the Iraqis, they attacked Kuwait from the sea. The commandos attacked from the sea, and the army from land, and they immediately took over the airport. These important places. There was very little fighting, and one emir was killed. Yeah, one emir was killed. Yeah. Then he put on a puppet. Saddam put on a puppet government, which no one ever knew, and the Americans started to recruit a huge, this coalition. You know, James Baker started making trips all over the place. He started by, he toured the world to convince, bribe, blackmail, and cajole people into this coalition. And he finally came up, you know, and they went to the Security Council, and the Security Council passed, gave them a green light to attack Iraq. So they had now they had the Congress, they had the Security Council, and everything was ready and set. And they had now the Kuwait, the Iraqi army was on the Kuwaiti-Saudi border, and President Bush sent Dick Cheney and Norman Schwarzkopf to Saudi Arabia. And they were afraid that it was going to take them a long time to convince the Saudi king to let the American army into Saudi Arabia. But funny enough, he just said yes, and that's it. Yes. And from the words of Dick Cheney, which I read, he said Schwarzkopf immediately started giving command to start, you know, deploy forces. And so this is the first part of Operation Desert Shield. They gathered a terrific amount of people in Saudi Arabia, you know, starting I think with 200,000 and increasing after this stage was over. The second stage began, which is Desert Storm, Operation Desert Storm, in which they attacked Iraq, and it's very famous, you know, with the fainting with from one side, and then a left hook from the desert, which was obvious for anybody who knew Iraq. I mean, like me, who worked in the desert and knows that there is nothing at all, you know, between the Euphrates and the Saudi border, nothing. Like I showed you on the map, you know, like this is the map. The people in Iraq live mainly along the rivers. So in the southwestern desert, it's empty, as you can see. There is nothing, not a single city, nothing. So when the American forces passed through here from the through the Saudi-Iraqi border, you know, that's it. That was the end. Yeah. So I think that the aftermaths of the war, of the first Iraqi war, are much more sad and terrible for the Iraqi people, much more, Jeff. And we entered into a series of I don't know how to put it, suffering, you know, the suffering of the Iraqi people from hunger, from the lack of medicine, from the lack of, is absolutely terrific. Me and my wife were there throughout these years. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. Let me give you an example. For instance, bread. You know, we were rationed. They were rationed, and we were given certain amounts of food every month. I will talk about this if need be in detail. I have it all. And we used to cook on a small stove of gasoline, and make our bread there. The wheat, the flour which they give us, I assure you, you wouldn't throw it to your pigs. And I am not exaggerating. I am not exaggerating. And it was terrible. And we lived like this for, we lived from 1991 to 1966, and the Iraqis lived till 2003. I can tell you many children did not see a single chocolate bar, a single banana for 8 years. And I am not exaggerating.
So you know very well that maybe our viewers don't, that the UN estimated that as many as 500,000 Iraqi children died from malnutrition during this period of the blockade and bombing of Iraq. And famously, Bill Clinton's Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, when she was asked about it, she said it was worth it.
Yes, yes, Jeff. I know that. I hope that our friends, American friends, this is available on YouTube and you can see it. You know, it's not just words, it's there. Besides that, besides what you mentioned, Madeleine Albright was against, you see, in point 22 of the law or the decree that the UN had passed, 687, there's point 22 of 687. It says that if the Iraqi side is okay with the weapons of mass destruction, if the inspector UN of the United States Special Commission, the inspectors say it's okay, then we can, we can lift, we let them sell oil. But Madeleine Albright said, no, that is not enough. Just for your information, in addition to what you just stated, Jeff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, let me, I think we can shortly get into questions and comments, but I just wanted to add something of a personal nature. You know, especially before the Iraq wars, a lot of Americans didn't pay much attention to the Middle East. It didn't mean it wasn't affecting us, but we just didn't pay attention. And my personal story is that during the 1980s, when the US was supporting Saddam Hussein in his war against Iran, I was working at General Electric in Lynn, nearby in Massachusetts, and we built 2 power plants for Iraq, who was, supposedly this horrible person. We built 2 power plants for Iraq, while in another part of the same factory, they were building the engines for the F-18 fighter bombers that destroyed the power plants that we were building. And by the way, GE, after 2003, GE won contracts to build new power plants to replace the ones that their own planes had destroyed in Iraq. So they made money from every angle of this conflict with Iraq, and they're still making money in Iraq.
I have no doubts whatsoever. I have no doubts whatsoever. You can expect anything. I mean, really anything. I'm not surprised.
So the U.S. was supplying and backing Iraq all during the 80s with economic and military aid, including chemical precursors for the poison gas that he was using against Iranians and his own people, that we condemned them for. We were supplying the chemicals for that. We and our allies were supplying the chemicals for the manufacture of poison gas. So it's a really nasty, crooked story from beginning to end. And unfortunately, people like you and your family and friends were the main victims of it to this day.
I would like to add just one small thing, Jeff, about chemicals and chemical weapons in Iraq. I would like to tell my American friends that Winston Churchill, in his days, in the 20s, when there was a tribal uprising, and he said use against them chemical weapons. And it is in writing. It is in writing in British documents that he said that. And by the way, I would just one more thing which I would like to add over here is that the British played the evil genius for the Americans. You see, it was the Fulton speech of Winston Churchill. It was Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher told him, "Don't be wobbly," to Bush Senior, and she reminded me of Lady Macbeth when she told Macbeth, "Just screw up your courage and stick it." And in both cases, you had a sexual implication, which whether it was Lady Macbeth or whether it was Thatcher. And these women, I am terrified not of men. I am terrified of these women like Thatcher, like Madeleine Albright. Frankly. Anyway, so like I said, after what I would like to stop upon is the concept of collateral damage. This combination of words, collateral damage, it would make George Orwell blush, believe me. It would make George Orwell blush. Let me give you an example. I think that I don't know whether any of my friends, American friends, have heard about the Amriya shelter, bomb shelter. There were about, this was after the first Gulf War. There were about 400 to 1,500 people killed there, mostly women and children. They were not killed. They were just they evaporated by the bombs that were thrown there. The thing is one more thing, which I would like to bring your kind attention, is that the blueprints, the companies which built this shelter were Swedish and Finnish. Just imagine, these Swedish and Finnish guys who are all so white and fluffy and kind and generous. They gave the blueprints of the bomb shelter to the US, and the bombs went into the bomb shelter with the help of those blueprints. Can you imagine? I simply was astonished when I found this out. Yeah, so we're talking about collateral damage. I found out that this word came from the Vietnam War. The words collateral damage came from the Vietnam War. I find that the American love of the quick, smart world, the fall of dominoes, the Indonesia and all the rest of the Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, gone. And then Iraq and so on. It's all collateral damage. Anyway, then after there was this George Bush made a speech after the war, and he said that this all can be stopped without bloodshed if the Iraqi people take things into their own hands and just take over. And the Iraqi people believed him, and in the south, the Shias, and in the north, the Kurds, they started insurrection, and of course, they, when they made, I forgot to tell you that the Americans after the war made two no-fly zones in the south and no-fly zones in the north. Now, but they forgot to mention, or they allowed him to use choppers. They allowed him to use choppers. And of course, he destroyed these two movements. And a lot of people were killed. And I was working there not far away from Karbala, which is one of the holiest places for the Shiites. And it looked to me like Gaza. Lots of places were with the bullets and shrapnel and whatever, the buildings, I mean. So
one other thing I want to ask you about before we get into comments and questions is there's some evidence that Saddam Hussein, as he was rising to power, was backed by the CIA. Isn't that correct? And that in the 50s and early 60s, Iraq had a very big communist movement, I think the largest in the Middle East, that the CIA was very concerned about. And of course, when Saddam came into power, he murdered and repressed most of the left in Iraq. Isn't that correct?
The Ba'athists had an expression: we arrived to power on an American train. If you follow I am repeating them. Now, what do they mean by that? For instance, you just mentioned the American services provided the Ba'athists with a list of the communists in Iraq. Now, let me give you an example on my family. Lucky for me, I was in the Soviet Union then studying. My father, my mother, my aunts, 4 aunts, all my other relatives were put in prison. My brother, was on the run because if they caught him, they would have killed him. He was on the run. So are you asking me what happened? This is what happened, in 1963. He was brought up, like I told you, when he was, the Egyptian Secret Services was his handlers. He was brought up then this way. And I am quite sure that the Egyptian had some kind of relations with the CIA. I'm quite sure of that.
Yeah, and of course, some of us know a couple of years after that, the CIA carried out the same massacres in Indonesia, where up to 1 million people were slaughtered for
Yes.
communists, just
Yes.
a few years later.
That's one more tragedy which is rarely mentioned, Jeff. Very rarely mentioned by anyone. This tragedy in Indonesia. No.
There's a very good book by the author, escapes my memory right now. It's called The Jakarta Method, because
Yes.
after the Indonesia massacres, the threat was used all over the world that this was coming for the left everywhere, and particularly in Chile. Before the U.S. supported coup in '73, there were graffiti all over Santiago. Jakarta is coming. So we didn't remember. We remembered that, not so much what the similar thing that happened in Iraq a couple of years before that, unfortunately. But well, I'm gonna, that we could go on and on and on, and there's a lot of interesting detail. But I'm going to ask Cole to
just if I may, if I may, please,
Yeah,
if I may,
please.
please, Jeff, just one small thing, which I would like to remind the friends hearing me now. I will repeat once more that there were 300,000 sorties between 1991 and 2003. There were 3 or 4 big attacks on Iraq throughout this period too, besides the sorties, which I mentioned just now. I was in Iraq then, and I can tell you it was very usual for us to hear every day, here and there, some bombs dropping. Nothing out of the ordinary. This is what I want you to know. The Iraq invasion had nothing to do with 9/11. 9/11. Iraq was in no way involved with 9/11, and neither that, there wasn't a single Iraqi on that plane. They didn't find anything to, they saw somebody talk to somebody, but then that somebody was in Florida. Come on, guys. I mean, you must try better to prove it. Really, there was nothing more. They saw somebody in Prague, of all places, an Iraqi talking to somebody from in Prague, and that was enough for them to, to say that the Iraqi supported Al-Qaeda, which is really funny. Not because, I'm defending, Saddam, but this is the truth. They had nothing to do with it.
I want to remind everyone that that bombing of Iraq was not done only by George Bush, but by Bill Clinton all through the 90s.
Yes, this is what I'm trying to say. Yes, very true. Very true, Jeff. And not only that, but, yeah, like I told you, like funny enough, everything that goes on, and I sometimes wonder if some kind of a dissertation would be written in U.S. history, Kent Starr and Monica Lewinsky, and how they affected the Iraqi war, for God's sakes.
And who paid the price for it. Yeah. So Cole, I don't know if there are people ready with questions, but I'm going to pass it over to you because you have the sort of technical ability to manage this better than I do. So.
Okay, Jeff. And thank you, Jamal. This has been so enlightening. I'm sure people have a ton of questions. So people, you could ask your question in one of 2 ways. Either write it in the chat or raise your virtual hand by using the reactions button on the bottom of your Zoom window and clicking raise hand. And if you do it that way, you can ask your question with your own voice. But if you just type it in the chat, I'll read it for you. So let's look in the chat and see what we have. Not much, not much. So we need some questions. Go ahead, don't be shy. Come on, Hayat. Come on, Tony. You were there. You followed these things over the years.
I will gladly,
Okay,
like
we
I
got-
said, if I can't answer now, I promise I'll write.
Very good. Thank you, Jamal. Okay, Russ has something to ask. Let's call on Russ. I have to make them unmute and then I can put them on screen. Go ahead, Russ.
I don't know if you can hear me, but
Yes, we can.
oh, good. I really appreciate you discussing the episode where I think it was Prince Bendar, whose niece was in front of the U.S. Congress saying that they were throwing the babies out. But my question that's always bothered me for a long time, why did he become such a negative influence to the United States government that Saddam was put on a hit list to be taken out? I don't understand that. Why did he do to lose favor with the United States? Thank you.
I think there is an English expression, which is he got too big for his britches. He came to the point where he thought he would be the third world leader. He would be the leader of the third world, where he started to talk about organizing the third world and holding a conference in Baghdad for the third world. And in my opinion, this is purely my personal humble opinion, that the leaders of the third world have a lifespan for the CIA, a lifespan, depending on how profitable is it for them to have him in power or to have him alive. As soon as they how should I say, they preemptively act when they see he's heading in the wrong direction, not in their direction, though they want him, they start acting. And I think that Saddam, at that point, when there was the nationalization of oil in Iraq, they stressed this point. The thing is that he got cozy with the Soviet Union, that he began giving contracts, oil contracts, to the Soviet Union, including the contract to Rumelia, one of the oil fields which I showed you on the map. This was, I think, the alarm signal for the Americans that, this guy is not our SOB anymore, he's somebody else. So this is when they started acting, from my point of view.
Okay, I'm going to combine two questions. Mary Lickert says, did the U.S. instigate the Iran-Iraq war? Actually, I'll just leave that one alone. Let me just ask you to tackle that one, Jamal.
I think that, I remember, I think it was Indira Gandhi. No, pardon me, it was Gandhi himself, who said, if two neighbors are fighting, then look for the British. So what I'm trying to say, sir, is that I think that I have not dived deeply into this, and therefore I do not want to commit myself. However, I'll give a point of view. Once more, let me go back to the map. Please take a good look at the map and look at the east, not the south now, look at the east. You will find a number of structures which we share with Iran. And that is one of the things which could be. There's one more thing which I would like to tell you. It is the water thing. The water between Iraq and Iran, which is now a big problem for us, for Iraq, because the Iranians have started building dams on all the tributaries of Iran, which go to Iraq and to the Tigris. And there's one more thing. It is the Shatt al-Arab. Shatt al-Arab is the river which comes out when the Tigris and the Euphrates meet, and they become one river going to Basra and going to the Gulf. There was always a kind of a fight between Iraq and Iran over the where would the borders pass? Would they pass inside the river or on the other side of the river? Then there is a point which I am loath to touch upon, but I think I will be forced to do so. It is the Sunni Shia problem of Iraq and Iran. Now, if you think that, then I think that in classical detective work, American classical detective work, you look for who is going to profit from an Iraq-Irani war. So of course, I'm not. I think what was his name? It was Stanley Gardner or whatever. I'm not that. I'm more to the Sherlock Holmes stuff. Anyway, so if we take a good look at the who is profiting from an Iraqi-Irani war, the obvious and clear is Israel. So if the two biggest enemies of Israel destroy each other, it will be a big thing for them. So, and I think that I would just like here to say, I am an atheist and I am an internationalist and I am a communist. I do not believe in religion. I do not believe in nationalism. So excuse me, don't take anything that I say on a personal level. I'm just, trying to put the facts. So I think that the Jewish lobby in the States is a very strong thing. So if they had in 1981, Israel attacked Iraq and destroyed the Iraqi nuclear reactor. An air attack, if you do remember. So all that shows that this was profitable. They needed it. It's a good thing for them. And I think besides that, like I told you, it is also good for the Saudi Arabia, which I forgot to mention, because Saudi Arabia was against Iran and against Iraq. So we have two big, strong supporters of this war.
Just to remind everyone that in 1979, the Shah of Iran was overthrown. And of course, prior to that, Iran had been one of the linchpins of the US sort of military control of the Middle East. So in a sense, we were using Iraq to punish Iran for changing their government and leaving the alliance with the US and Israel.
Yeah. Okay, Hayat Imam asks, is it true that Saddam Hussein was charting a more independent economic path, not one tied to the US, possibly even moving away from the dollar as the medium of exchange?
That is true. That is true. I do not deny that. There wasn't only, it wasn't like I said before. It's not black and white. There were many things. There was a lot to do with building of schools, hospitals, roads, this electricity. And nobody will deny that. Although it is, how should I say, it is a bit not to my taste the way things were done, but still things were done. And even after the war, after 3 or 4 months, Saddam Hussein managed to bring in electricity and water, things which the US hasn't been able to do for the last 10 years. This has to be said. It is. I don't say that. So it is true, ma'am. What you said is correct.
You're muted, Cole.
Sorry. Next up is Tony Palumba. Tony, can you unmute?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, sir. I had to step out at one point, so I don't know if my question has already been answered, but I just wanted to make a note, make a comment on the Globe's coverage of the Iraq War today. There was a horrible article by
Jeff Jacoby, yeah.
Jacoby, who listed the reasons. His title of is "Ending Saddam Hussein's Reign of Terror Was the Right Call," and put out all the arguments about why we should have gone into the country, regardless of the fact that we had nothing to do with 9/11, that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. And the front page article was talking about how many veterans of the war serve in Congress and how that war has shaped their thinking. Not particularly, but what I'm mentioned, my comment has to do with, there is nothing other than one line in that article about how many Iraqis died. They had the 4,500 US soldiers died, but it's just, the statement was then thousands of Iraqis. And it seems to me that on the anniversary of a huge mistake by the US, that there could have been a much more critical analysis of the situation as we looked at it. Many of us, as Cole said, spent a lot of our time prior to the war organizing people to protest the potential occupation, week after week, trying to put pressure on the administration not to invade. Obviously, some of those demonstrations were the biggest in the area. At least I know it was one of the biggest in Boston. Unfortunately, we were not successful. And those were not local, those are not just in the US. This was a worldwide effort to stop the invasion. Again, I apologize if you spoke about this, Jamal, but I wonder if you could give us and again, if you did this, I'll go back and read it. But can you give us a sense of where Iraq is right now in terms of its political makeup and its economic situation, political, economic situation at this point?
Well, let me begin with some generalities. The fabric of the society has been destroyed. You know, the fabric. The work ethics, I'm not going to talk about imperialism. I'm not going to talk about, I'm just trying to, at first, to zoom in, and then we'll talk about big things. The work ethics, this is what I'm hearing from my friends in Iraq. The work ethics has changed. Iraqi people are not like the people from the Gulf countries. These people are working people. You know, they worked in oil refineries, they worked as farmers, they worked, and things went on. All of a sudden, after this war, the last war, the work ethics have changed. The consumer mentality has arrived. People want to get rich fast. They see that the crook, the person without principles, the person that is can make a quick buck, as they say, American slang. And this frightens me just as much as the big things, sir, if you follow me. You know, when I talk to people, what I have gathered from literature, from newspapers, from TV, I watch TV Iraq too, is that the situation now is there is a very strong corruption. A strong corruption. There is strong sectarianism. There is strong localism, and there's a lot of problems that has to do with ethnicity. So in this kind of an environment, it is easy for foreign powers to move things according to what they want, whether it's Iran, whether it's Saudi Arabia, whether it's the United States, whether it's Turkey. So right now, the situation is not good. Briefly, it's not good. There's not, whether it's the parliament, whether it's the electricity, whether it's the water supply, whether it's schooling, whether it's hospitals, even in Saddam's time, it was better.
So can I follow up on that?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead,
Go on.
Jay. Go ahead.
So what do you think needs to happen to turn Iraq around? I mean, this issue of corruption and the idea that you're saying that the work ethic has dropped and that people are more interested in finding a way to make a fast buck. What institutions have failed? And then how can we, and how can Iraqis, I should say, reinvigorate those institutions to get out of the present situation?
I think that, I think that the only power in Iraq which has a reputation which has not been, touched upon with dirt is the Communist Party of Iraq. It is the only party there which has not been touched by this. They are, unfortunately, they have not been able to take advantage of their reputation, of their history. They have come into, too much in accordance with what the occupation forces wanted. They have come to discuss with them. They have not stood a more principled stance. They have not come up with a program that would show the way out of this. They have not become with a strong program showing the way out of this. Because they are, in my opinion, they are the only ones that can do it. No other force can do it. The others are all tied to nationalism, and they are all tied to religion. They are all tied to sectarianism, and they are all tied to their own. There is not an idea, there is not an ideology that is internationalist that can gather all the Arabs, the Kurds, the Turkomans, the Yazidis, and so on, and the Christians all together in one. See, there is no ideology like that. Either if you become a nationalist, it's the straight path to fascism. If you become, sectarian, that's it. You start killing each other, and that's it. So they are the one. They have to take this on their shoulders. This is why you see the youth movement. That movement has been taken over either by the religious, or by the West. And instead of going for the deep things, for the real things, they go for the trifles, for trifles, for just the pop music, the dancing, this and that. They don't go for the things which are important. This is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamal. Jeff, I'm going to hand it back to you to make any closing comments and call on Jamal to do the same.
Yeah. So Jamal, thank you very much. Speaking personally, we owe you and all the other people of Iraq a huge reparations for the damage that we've done to your country. And unfortunately, our political situation here doesn't allow that kind of discourse.
I did not find time to tell you, we paid Kuwait $52 billion.
Right. So, in the U.S. establishment, crimes are only committed by others, not by ourselves and our elites, and others pay and we don't. And of course, the criminals who organized the attacks on Iraq in the 90s and the 2000s are living a very comfortable retirement now, while Iraq is still suffering from the aggression that was perpetrated by them. So
I wish I had more time to tell you about Iraq and the United Nations. That's a very interesting topic. I hope that maybe in the future.
Anyway, personally, on behalf of our viewers, I want to thank you for the insights you've been able to supply and your generous offer of your time. And I know that you and I will continue to correspond, and God willing, I will see you in person sooner or later.
Inshallah.
Inshallah, inshallah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank
All
you.
of MAPA for organizing this, and
It's been an honor. It's been an honor. Thank you very much.
It's been an honor for us by far. And people who didn't attend will have the opportunity to view a video of this if they weren't able to attend live. So Jamal, many thanks to you and to your wife,
Thank you.
your comrades and friends and family in Iraq, and all best wishes.
To hear you. And it's
All best wishes to you, and
very difficult time.
as I said, inshallah, I will see you in person sometime.
Inshallah. Okay. Take care.
Everyone.
Thank you.